All right, cool. Um, well, tell me a bit about how you made your way like to Los Angeles. I understand that you come from an artistic family. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So, it's a funny story because before I came to LA, I never even visited once. So I just kind of moved here um, during COVID for grad school. So I went to DMA, and I feel like my road towards getting to DMA was not linear in the sense that in undergrad I didn't study like fine arts or computer um, programming or yeah, just not I never thought I would go into the realm of digital art. So it is kind of a long story in terms of, like, how I got here and moved to LA. So in undergrad, I studied art history and psychology, thinking that I would be on the path towards working in, like, the traditional fine art space as an art administrator. Like, I worked at the Whitney, and, like, Christie's auction house, really on the admin side of things. And growing up, I saw my father work, as an artist. So he's a painter, and he belonged to the generation of Chinese artists who immigrated to New York, back in the '80s. So, I kind of heard stories about the challenges that an artist faces, in their practice on, like, practical levels and things like that. So I was kind of dissuaded from pursuing the career of an artist, which is what led me to being within, like, the art admin space, kind of being tangential to actual, practicing art and art making. But I think while I was working in these, art institutions, I just really wanted to pursue, like, my true passion and what I wanted to do in life. So that really pushed me to, want to go into this mode of creating and really owning that and being brave about it. So that was one side of things. But how I got into digital art is also like another story where um, having this background in art history and working in these like fine art spaces, I was seeing paintings and sculptures every day. But my partner at the time, he was working in interior design, and I was seeing him do like 3D models and renderings of interior spaces. And it was like playing Sims, almost just dragging and dropping like chairs and different walls and configuring them. And I was like, wow, this is a job. Like, I would love to do that. It looked so easy when he was doing it, just dragging and dropping. And he's like, you want to try? So I like sat, like, by his computer, and I tried to click around, and things started flashing, and I don't know what was happening because, yeah, Rhino is a difficult software. Not as
Yeah, yeah,
easy
yeah.
as Civ. Yeah, so, but really cool to just, like, see him, create these renderings and digital spaces, so that was one side of it. The other side that I always like to talk about is going into this Samsung VR experience store in New York back in probably like 2015. That was my
Yeah.
first VR experience.
Okay.
Yeah, and, it was like Santa themed Christmas. It was like a Christmas themed, early, like, experiment prototype product that they were displaying in the showroom. And I just walked in there without knowing anything. I think it was just, like, walking around the city, and they had, like, a Santa's sleigh as, like, a centerpiece where people could sit on the sleigh and put on the headset. So I tried that without knowing what this was. Like, I've heard of VR, I've never tried it, and once I put that on, it was just like, crazy, it was sensational. Like, the
Yeah,
sleigh
yeah.
started vibrating, like, sensors. It was, like, synced to what was displayed in the headset, which is, like, a sleigh in the mountains going through, like, the Swiss Alps and then, like, reindeers flying everywhere. So that was my first VR experience, which was really incredible, and that just opened my mind to this whole new world of even though it was like a commercial product and within like a, display room setting, it wasn't art at all, really. But I just that was so memorable to me, just how, light and color and sound and motion are all coalescing. which is not something I found in the traditional art spaces that I was
Mm.
familiar with. So that instantly opened me up to like, oh, there's VR, there's this entire world that I am not familiar with, and it was just so exciting. So I think all of these factors contributed to like why I wanted to apply to grad school. Really fortunate to have gotten accepted to DMA at UCLA, and yeah, since then I feel like I've gained a lot of confidence in just being an artist and working with the tools and skills that I know, and now I teach 3D at, USC, and, um, so, yeah, now I'm the one teaching the difficult software to students.
Um, do you remember the conversation with your father, like, when you had to tell him that you wanted to, become an artist as opposed to doing stuff on the administrative side?
Yeah, he was, I mean, he just gave me a lot of warnings. He was like, "It's your life, um, your choice." My mom was like, "I thought you would be a doctor because since you were a kid, you loved anatomy books." And I would tell her, I didn't wanna be a doctor, I just like human anatomy, like, I like the form of it.
Right,
I
right,
feel like
right,
that should have been a early indicator. But, yeah,
right.
they eventually were supportive, I think they were just worried that it would be, like, challenging and, um, maybe not as easy as, working a desk job and doing I think they were really supportive because they know that being an artist has been, like, a childhood dream whenever, teachers or people ask, "Oh, what do you wanna be when you grow up?" It was always artist for me, but I feel like, um, my parents, like, having been through the challenges that they went through, they were just wary of this path, and also, being immigrants too, like, even though they were my father was an artist, and is an artist still, he just saw a lot of, challenges along the way, and I think
Yeah.
that's really a reason why, they would ask me, "Are you sure?" And eventually because I showed, how determined I was uh, and I was just not super happy doing the admin side of things, so, yeah, they eventually were accepting of it, although they did try to dissuade me a couple more times, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Were the warnings, like, from your dad, were they more, like, practical warnings about the difficulties, or were they, like, creative warnings about the challenges of, like, finding the right subject matter? Or are they, like, I don't know, more practical economic concerns, just that, pursuing art as a practice is hard, or maybe a blend of all of those things all of those things?
Yeah, it was definitely a blend. Yeah, the practical side of things for sure because, yeah, it's just not, like, the most stable career or you
Right,
you
right,
wanna frame it as, like, a career with, like, certain checkpoints, it's just so ever flowing and what you make of it, so that was definitely part of it, but another side of things is I feel like my father being from that generation of Chinese artists and being a man, there were also some sort of, like, gendered ideas of, you know, being a woman and being a woman artist and how that will add to the challenge in ways,
right, right,
which
right,
I, listened to earlier on in my childhood, but then as I grew older and older and I saw these incredible artists who are also women, and
right.
professors in the field and things like that, it's like I know that it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We'll come back to this just because, some of your work relates to like your identity and multi-generational conversations that you're having, much like the although they're with yourself as opposed to maybe with your father directly. Um, did you see any, I don't know, I guess parallels between like his experience like coming to United States and then your own navigating two cultures? Was there a place where you maybe saw some of the things that that your both your parents were thinking about as relates to your own personal experience, like here in the States?
That's a good question. Mm, yeah, I think our experiences are, pretty, very different because I was born in the US, and I just grew up with American culture from the get-go, even though from, 1st grade until, like, the end of middle school, I moved to Shanghai with my family, so I had to, um, learn about Chinese culture and what it means to be a Chinese American living in China. So it was like having to deal with both sides of, that identity, which, yeah, I think does come through a lot in my own work. The idea of moving between places and moving between languages and cultures, um, and the idea that, identity is something that I had to keep reassembling and to yeah, just it's, like, constantly shifting and reforming, and that feeling of kind of never fully being here or there, that's actually a feeling that I'm really familiar with, and I think something that both my parents also feel being immigrants, so that's definitely a feeling that comes up a lot in, the works that I make, which translates also beyond the kind of cultural identity aspect towards themes as well. So exploring kind of the in-betweenness of presence and absence, or being human, or the not quite human forms, like the avatars that I make, and um, more, yeah, just thoughts on digital media and like representation. So yeah, I feel like that in-betweenness, even though stemmed from like my childhood experiences and also hearing stories of um these generations, like, I'm just really fascinated by that, so, yeah. I think,
Yeah.
that comes through.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. On the practice side, though, he worked as your dad works as a painter. Um, did you see any of, like, maybe an interest in painting from a technique or standpoint? 'Cause certainly certainly with Primavera, like, there's obviously strong allusions to, like, portraiture and those kind of, like, Renaissance, those kind of those landscape set I'm sorry, just those I'm just curious because there's a painterly quality, I think, particularly for that work with Primavera, and I was just curious whether that was something were you looking through, books of his or, seeing artwork or you can't touch it, but certainly, was there anything, I don't know, I guess, about the technique that maybe you felt like, drew you to some of the approaches that you've taken with your digital work?
Yeah, I think for that piece, and yeah, for Primavera specifically, I was just, um, reading and looking at, like, famous artworks and art periods within Western art history, and depictions of beauty and nature and renewal. So not necessarily referencing my father's style, and his style is more like abstract expressionist with
Hmm.
Chinese ink. So it's very different, although scale is something that I feel like I'm really inspired by him uh in that aspect, where his drawings and paintings are on really large scale, often like full wall size. And for me, I feel like that monumental scale aspect is something that, I would love to pursue. So that's kind of form-wise, why I'm interested in, like, projection and projection installations. But other than that, yeah, Primavera was just taking inspiration from, depictions of, like, spring and renewal and all of that. Um Yeah, but I think, like, in thinking about Primavera now and the time that has passed between when I made it, I feel like I'm not fully, like, it's not complete yet, in the sense that at the time I was thinking about loops and, like, cyclical nature, and repetition, which contributes to, like, the avatars in the scene kind of going on loops and moving through, predetermined choreography. But I feel like recently I've been just super interested in going beyond that and learning about how to create more rule based systems. kind of freeing them from 0 to 1, like, predetermined loops without any randomness. So there was definitely, like, a technical limitation then too. It's just, like, doing, what I could and trying to express that, but these days, I'm, like, learning more about Unreal and trying to create systems so that I can, like, model different relations, and that just opens up, like, even more possibilities that I think will be really exciting.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned your previous work or just like that early career work on the admin side at Christie's, Whitney, and then also that, you were seeing, like, women artists who inspired you. Were there, like, artworks in those institutions, that, inspired you? Or I guess conversely, were there artworks that you saw that were, like, they felt constrained by their medium? 'Cause the work that you're doing is, the work that you're doing in some ways is in dialogue, with maybe some of the things that you saw during that time, but maybe also trying to break from some of the conventions that you saw there. But yeah, I was just curious if you had any experience looking through something, whether it's like a catalog or conversation with conversation with a coworker or a walkthrough with an artist that maybe helped you reflect on wanting to become an artist full time.
Mm, yeah, I think there's just so many incredible women artists, it's hard to kind of call out my favorites. I feel like I would love that. It would be a whole catalog, a whole book. Carrie's favorite women artists. No, but I feel like one example is, Jennifer Steinkamp.
Okay.
She showed up well, when I was in, I went to NYU for art history, and in a contemporary art class, the professor showed some slides on, uh, digital artists, and it was just probably like 20-minute quick lecture of, like, different artists working who have been influential, and I saw Jennifer Steinkamp's work on the screen for the first time, and I saw how her work was large scale, spatial, and she created these, digital flowers and trees, and, um, they were kind of just gently falling down in the sky or, like, against a black background, not even a sky, and I found that to be so, um, moving in ways that, um yeah, I saw a lot of parallels between or, like, sort of linking and making connections between her work and, um, uh, it was, like, with abstraction, but also, kind of, like, reminded me of, um who's that artist? Wow, I'm suddenly blanking, but
Yeah,
it
that's okay.
comes from, like, I could definitely see, like, the painterly qualities there and the abstraction that was going on there in the overall composition, even though each flower and each tree was, really, carefully, created and textured in almost like a photorealistic way. Um, but that was the first time I saw Jennifer's work, and a lot of the other artists that the professor was introducing to the class at the time on the slides were, um, men or who were working with, like yeah, like projection or animation, but I think Jennifer really stood out and I liked her work a lot. So when I did go to, um, different websites to look for grad programs, I saw Jennifer was a professor at DMA, and she was a big reason why I, applied. So yeah, I learned a lot through, just being able to work with her. I was her TA in grad school, so yeah, it was really inspiring to see, her work with, animation and 3D from, like, decades ago and being, like, a pioneer in that space, and then continuing to work with students and, um, to also, she's, like, very, up to date with everything that's still going on with, like, Maya, the software and 3D. Um, she gave me really great feedback and critiques in grad school, so I just love that loop that happened from me first knowing who she was and then being able to work with her, and
Yeah.
I just her being an inspiration.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
no, of course. You mentioned The Sims earlier. Did you have, like, a relationship to games
Oh,
growing up as a medium? I'm always interested in artists who make their way to things like Unreal,
yeah.
whether that's like whether that is a touch point for them or it's like a newer development in their practice.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think for Sims, I just loved, that sort of simulation aspect of it, and I played it wow, probably when I was in, like, elementary school. I got some, like, scraped copies of it sold at, like, fake DVD stores in China. It was, like, not real, not legit Sim copy. Um, but I was able to boot it up, and when I played it, I was like, "Wow, I can control all these human beings in this I can make my own living room, I can decorate each of their spaces, they have their own interactions," like, um, that was yeah, it was my favorite game. I also liked Club Penguin,
Yeah.
um, or, like, Neopets, these kind of, worlds where we can, have develop our own personalities and identities. Yeah, I loved it as a kid. Um, yeah, but I think, that was kind of like a hobby or interest, that I didn't really make the full connection between the gaming world and, like, the world of Sims and taking on another identity within these, games until, um grad school probably, where I was more aware of, all of these different sides of things of, like, game theory and, like, simulation and 3D and how that all coalesces. So yeah, when I did finally, get better at my 3D skills, I realized that this is something that is possible to achieve, and then as I was learning Unreal and, um more of the kind of programming side of things, I realized, "Oh, that takes so much work to make," but the idea of rule-based, um, systems and also the randomness that can come through that, is just, yeah, really compelling, so, um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with The Sims. Well, one that there are these routines for the characters, that they have things that they like to do, which I think certainly to me looks like some of the behaviors like in Primavera in some way. Like the characters have these things that they're doing in isolation, but then also together.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting about The Sims is, over the course of development of the game, they started creating like more complex dynamics in terms of like, I think with The Sims 3 in particular, they added like wants and desires. That was like a newer development to try to add this like emotional interiority for the characters. So they weren't just like having a little status bar that they're trying to fill up, but they have things that they're trying to like achieve in this like little world. And those might be outside of themselves. Cause The Sims is also like a bit of a strange game in that like you don't really control, you sort of control the characters, but like you sort of control the characters, but they also there is a high degree of like randomness in the interactions, and so you can't just like it's not like a you know another type of video game where you're controlling every single movement. The character doesn't move unless you tell them to do so. So there's a high degree of autonomy in The Sims, which I think is very interesting. It's a unique gameplay format, like as far as like games are concerned.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, so for temporal portrait, you have these 24 versions of yourself across these different life stages, like in a single frame. And then you're basically having this, using AI aging filters to kind of meet a future version of yourself. What was that like encountering, or I guess like building encounters with these other versions of you in a non-serendipitous fashion? You're making them directly. What were those encounters like with the different versions of yourself in digital form?
Yeah, I think the effect was most striking when I first projected them at life-size scale on a wall. Just seeing them the same height
Yes.
as me, kind of staring back on the same level was, really striking, and I thought, "Okay, I was modeling and texturing these on my computer for weeks, and now I'm finally seeing them on a wall. I didn't expect myself to have like this physical or like physiological reaction to it, but when I did see them stare back with, through the projection, it did feel ghostly in a sense, and I almost felt a real sense of presence. Or it was presence. It just wasn't, it wasn't me, but it was like that uncanny feeling,
Yeah,
which
yeah, yeah.
was the start beginning point of thinking more about the uncanny valley and what that means for my work and my practice because I do engage with human forms and for myself, like these self portraits too. That was where I became so interested in that moment of what I was just describing. That yeah, that pause where I feel like there was this micro delay in my brain looking at the figures and thinking, like, I know these aren't me, these aren't alive, but I'm seeing them move and bling, uh, and breathe, uh, at life-size scale, so that sort of delay that was happening in my brain is just really fascinating to me, and just yeah, and thinking about presence as well through these digital, um, forms.
Um, when you say, like, presence, like, what does that mean for you? Like, when you say you have, like, presence with an avatar of yourself, like, how are you thinking about that? How do you define it?
Mm, yeah. I think in the context of temporal portrait, like, that physiological reaction is something that I was really, drawn to and interested in. It's different from the sense of presence in, like, let's say, when I was creating these avatars on my screen, like, I knew that they looked like me, um, that I was referencing, my own self and different layered images generated by AI filters of what I looked like while I was aging. Um but seeing them at life-size scale and the subtle animations of them, like, breathing and blinking, these indicators of life,
Yeah,
um, yeah, it just it was like a mirror almost, except I know that they're not real and they're just synthetic, but they still were that was still able to give me, like, a weird sensation, like, in my real body,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that is where the sense of presence within space comes from, and the projection also gives them, like, a ghostly quality, like, through the light, so, um, yeah, that is, yeah, really a moment of where that presence came through.
Yeah. How accurate did you feel like the AI predictions, like,
We'll have to
were?
see.
Yeah, right, yeah, yeah, good point, good point. Yeah, I guess you'll be able to have a record, so in X number of years' time, you'll be able to see.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I guess it's, like, how accurate they are versus how accurate they felt, right? Like, there's, like, 'cause it's like it's in your mind's eye, you think about, like, what you might be like when you're old. Uh, it's interesting when, as I get older, I had somebody say this, like, there's this moment you look in the mirror and you see, like, your parents' face,
Mm,
your father's face looking
yeah.
back at you, and it's like a very strange moment, so in your mind, you sort of I look a lot like my father, so, like, it makes it a little bit easier for me. I can kinda, like, see my dad. I'm like, "Oh, I can see a lot of myself in him." But,
No, interesting.
yeah,
Growing
yeah,
up, I think what my relatives told me is, like, I don't distinctly look like more like my father or my mother,
yeah.
um and I think that also stuck with me, and then I'm like, "Who am I? What do I look like?"
Yeah, there's no guarantee. I mean, it's just like that's
Yeah,
how genetics work. And, obviously, like, your face is only one piece of, like, a much larger, like, your body doesn't place, like, doesn't place a specific weighting on making sure that you have facial features that are like your parents, where, like, you can have all these other markers of your parents, your physiology or
yeah.
personality or, other things that are much more straight. Much of your body doesn't, like, care to make sure it's evenly distributed across the entirety of your body. Your liver might be, like, more like your
Yeah,
mother's or something like that. Yeah. Did, creating, like, older versions of yourself, like, that change the way you think about, like, aging? It's a slow it's like this weird, both slow and very it's like very slowly, 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 and then, like, then you're old. And then you're in your 40s, your 50s, it goes by faster. Did it change the way you think about, like, aging as a person? You've kind of put a line in the sand at this point, like, you've got a benchmark now to compare your future self to.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just curious how, like, if I am fortunate enough to, like, grow old and get to, let's say, like, 80 years old, 90 years old. I'm so curious about what 90-year-old Carrie thinks about that work.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
Because right now it's easy for me to say, like, I'm still, you know, pretty youthful and
Right, right.
making this work and using, like, AI filters to kind of see what potentially I might look like. Um But those images were also, layers of different imagery, so I took, uh, documentation of, like, old photographs of my grandmother and even my great-grandmother, and I kind of compiled them all with the AI image of me being middle-aged and then, like, older. So these were all, like, synthesized with, ancestral photographs, so for me, I was like, maybe this will bring some additional element of realness or an interesting sort of synthetic generational quality to these base textures. Um, yeah, but I really don't know how 90-year-old Carrie will react. I think she'll probably compare and kind of do a side by side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is very interesting because 'cause we're, one is, like, culturally, we're starting to play more with these ideas about, like, memory, that AI can, faithfully recreate. You're seeing this where, like, I think recently there was, like, Jim Acosta, who was a reporter. He did, like, a faux interview with a survivor, I think, of, like, the Parkland shooting where the parents, like, authorized that you could do like, they took, a child who had died, and he did this interview with a version of this child that, like, gotten older. Or you see this, like, in advertising where, you take characters, I think Marilyn Monroe or some of these characters who've been have digital likenesses, and now you're starting to, like, play with these ideas that, we don't, play with these ideas that you can sort of create these versions of people who never exist and put them in context in which they never exist. Um, at the same time, we're also living through this era where this is the first generation. My wife is a high school teacher, and it's very interesting for that for kids who grew up in a smartphone era. They have so much access to like images of themselves when they were very young. I have very few photos. I have no video of myself, before the age of, I don't know, 20, 25. Like the first 25 years of my life are undocumented, so to
Yeah.
speak, in terms of like I don't have a digital record of those. And so not only can AI, now create those just from like images, right? You can just create images. I could have, create versions of myself doing the things I used to, but also in real time, we also have like a wider record, a digital record for, certainly for generations that grew up after a smartphone. So it's a very interesting time to be playing or be thinking about like what past and future versions of ourselves were doing or will do in the future, because we'll be able to verify it, you know, with each passing moment, we'll be able to verify it like more and more.
Yeah, there's also, like, online, websites. This was probably just 3 or 4 years ago when I was, starting to think about the piece, where, you could upload an old photograph and the AI preliminary AI would be able to animate, like, um, your faces, like, smiling or speaking back to you. That technology has changed so much in
Yeah.
the last few months and how easy it is to access that, so, yeah, that is, it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. 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 It does really, these ideas of like memory are really changing a lot. Um, well, I wanted to talk to the avatars piece of it in this work, and then we can talk about Primavera. You described some of the avatars as having this like not quite like humanness, that they're both not a part of reality, but they're familiar, in this case, extremely familiar. Why is that like liminal quality important to what you want to express about identity and about time?
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think, like, my approach to the piece wasn't, like, having all these grand concepts in mind before making it. I think I was first, um, really interested in avatars as, like, a container of an identity, whether it's truly embodied, like, by me, the person who's designing it, or if it's speculative and really freeing and someone else or a creature entirely fictional. I was just thinking about avatars um, and I just wanted to make one of myself. Um, that was, like, the starting point because in Sims, I would also try to, create versions of myself, but at varying levels of fidelity. In the sense, I would make one that resembled me and what I like in the interests, I would be like, likes art, likes to paint. But then I would also have different versions where, um, this version of Carrie maybe has, like, blue skin or something. So, with this skill that I was developing in creating, like, photorealistic looking avatars, I did wanna challenge myself and create a version of me, and I thought this would give me the opportunity to really explore that dynamic between me and this, like, digital clone or twin, but as I kept working on it, I felt this sense of empathy towards this digital Carrie, um, and also, like, looking through, uh, like, let's say Daz or, other, like, 3D marketplaces where if you search for, like, female avatar, it's just, like,
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
search, results.
Yeah, we had, I spoke to Harriet Davy, who's a who's a 3D
I love
artist,
her work,
and,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was one of the things we did. It's like they were like, "Let's look at that." Let's take just for example, let's pull up Daz and see what's on the homepage, and
It's
it's
really
like
wild, and
yeah.
especially if you look up Asian woman, it gets
Oh, yeah, we didn't do that.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I think just when I was first trying to work with avatars, I did go on those sites and, like, looked around, and I was, like, really jarred by it, um, but also eventually also a little bit desensitized because I was just, like, browsing, and after, 40 pages of
Right, right.
images, like, yeah, it just seemed almost like, "Oh, yeah, of course, this would be the next page." But yeah, for my own piece, like, as, like, digital Carrie came through on my screen, I really felt a connection and sense of empathy because it's, like, more like a conversation with myself, and I thought, "Where would I wanna place myself? What would I be doing?" Um, and, uh, I thought it would be cool if I could meet, um younger versions of myself or older versions of myself and put them together in a sort of place. There was also an interesting coincidence at the time where I went back to Shanghai to visit my parents, and my mom showed me an old photograph that I've never seen before of when she was like 3 years old. So I feel like that's kind of similar to you, where uh, I really haven't seen any documentation of my mother as a child, only
Right,
as,
yeah.
like, either a young adult or, like, fully an adult. I had no idea what she looked like as a baby or even as, like, young girl. I just didn't have that visual in my head.
Yeah,
So being able to see that, image of her as, like, a three-year-old girl sitting on my great-grandmother's lap in this sort of, 60s communist China photography style against a fake backdrop of Tiananmen Square, like, it just, was so crazy that, finally I have a visual of what my mother looked like as a child, and, um, I saw a lot of similarities between that child and photos of myself as, like, a three-year-old. So, that was also part of how this idea came about, where I would kind of merge, her face when she was 3 and, like, my childhood photos, and then combine those form the base texture of, some of the
right.
younger versions there. And in the end, I just wanted to take, like, a more minimalist approach and really focus on these individual avatars and being able to talk about, like, the process of making them versus what they would all be doing. I feel like that feels like a larger project that I can keep working towards. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I spoke to Chen maybe I don't know a couple weeks ago
Mm.
for something that we wrote, and I was interesting hearing her talk about her interest in these like cross generational conversations that she was having with with her mother and with her grandfather. So yeah, I just wonder if there's something. Yeah, if there is something, I wonder how much of it's like generational or it's tied to these kind of like cross cultural dialogues, a function of just like, having moved to a different place. So it creates this like curiosity for like your past. I mean, I certainly feel that certainly with my family and like wondering about, past generations of my family and how they made their way from Mexico and then, through the Middle Passage all those, like, years ago. I'm just, like, curious about it. So I just wonder, it's like, yeah, we have digital tools now that can help, serve as a bridge or a link to help imagine those things in a way that maybe you would have done, like, through, I guess maybe through portraiture or through literature or through another art form that working in this medium allows you to answer or explore some of the questions that you maybe have about, yourself and your identity in a way that wouldn't have been possible
Yeah.
if all you had access to was, film or photography or something like that.
Yeah. No, totally. I definitely think digital tools, are, yeah, like, kind of the gateway towards asking a lot of these questions and thinking through them and processing them, not necessarily providing, um, any, like, solution, but just as a tool to process, um, and it's just getting crazier and crazier with, like, AI and
Yeah, yeah,
storing memory, the synthesis of, like, voice and text, and how, computer graphics are just getting stronger and stronger. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. But I did wanna bring up something else with that. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I also think it relates back to what we talked about earlier, just, like, with you not having documentation of yourself as a younger, um, like, in your childhood maybe, or, like, my mother not having that many photos of when she was a baby or a young girl, and nowadays, like, kids are born with, iPhones and so many photographs of
Yeah,
every moment, um it's just that technological shift and maybe me and Ina being in that generation where we grew up not with too much, still with technology, obviously, but not as intense as it is today, and we were the
yeah.
generation that saw, like, Apple open their first store in China, like, maybe when we
Mm,
were in elementary school, so I think we're really, at least for me, like, I feel like I was, really conscientious of that development on the technological side, even though I was, like, a child, but still, seeing these tech developments and getting excited about, "Oh, this is the new iPod Touch, and this is, like, um, the new Sims that just came out or something, the new
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and having social media, like, develop and boom in different ways. Feelings of, how can we stay connected to friends or to our past, to memories, like, all of that is shifting. I think I was just really conscious of all of these changes and trying to, notice them as much as I could. Yeah, and then eventually now it's, like, trying to see how that's kind of shifting my own understanding between memories of my past, of my family's past, and even culturally, like, cultural memories.
yeah. Um, well, we can move on to Primavera. So, Primavera places yourself, these multiple selves within like a traditional Chinese landscape. It's a spring landscape, as the new name alludes to. It's blossoming flowers everywhere. What drew you to like that specific, art historical genre in your work? And yeah, maybe how does it tie to some of the questions that you're already exploring around like ancestral connections?
Mhm. Yeah, um always wanted to do a piece on seasons. It's just such a, um, I guess, archetype
Yeah.
within like art history. Just how do you approach seasons, like the four seasons? It's just classic, and I wanted to do my own take on it. So I was referencing a lot of um, different like visual um, motifs that are in like Renaissance art and like Romantic period art. So a lot of flowers, a lot of blossoms, but also the form itself. Like what poses do these characters have within these landscape paintings? So I was really intrigued by the idea of a expansive landscape with humans that are kind of spawned at different spots and performing these beautiful gestures and poses. But like I mentioned earlier, I think as I finished up Primavera and was moving on to like summer or like autumn, I just wasn't fully satisfied with, um, or not fully satisfied, but I just saw more potential in what it could be, right? So I wanted to create some more randomness and make the scene feel more alive. And there was just a lot I feel like I could add to. So I kind of paused after spring and needed to reassess like what would summer, fall, and winter look like. And I think they would be more lively.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Seasons are also funny because they're not the same everywhere. I mean, living here in Southern California, like we just don't have the same types of like our winter is the summer, like that's the dead season, and then winter, we have a raining season. And I was talking to someone in Mumbai, and like they have a rainy season there, like a really strong like monsoon season. So it's funny, these ideas of like what seasons are really also very context. Like the idea of alluding to a season of spring that looks a particular way is an allusion to a particular tradition as well. Like you're making some choices about which spring you would like to you would like to capture, which I think is really really interesting. Yeah. Um, let's see here. Now, can you tell me about the routines for the characters? So these were like the process for designing like each one of the characters and then giving them, basically a pattern. Are they on like a loop? Is it a looping animation, or do they have like specific? Yeah, just tell me a bit about the creation and the placing, the positioning of the characters and how they enter and exit the frame, or when they go about doing their things, dancing and twirling and staring contemplatively,
Yeah.
off screen. How did you decide who should go where and what they should be doing?
Yeah. So for for their expressions, I did use like facial motion capture to like perform a lot of the blinking, breathing. I like to keep um these like bodily animations more subtle, because I did know that they would be eventually shown in pretty big scale. So I feel like subtle movement there was actually um, a strong choice just to kind of ground these avatars. Um, yeah, but their dancing and movement were like keyframed, uh, and then yeah, I guess like the looping and playing of them was just not there wasn't, like, a specific set of, rules I was trying to follow. It was just, compositionally, like, what looked
Right, right, right. Yeah.
there are certain poses and gestures, like a younger version of myself hugging or holding an older version of myself on, like, the more right side of the piece. Um, there's 2 child versions of me in the back jogging, and they have moments where they crisscross. So there are definitely moments where our highlights, um, when all of them show up and appear in the scene together. There's also moments where, they jog past each other and then there's like fewer avatars left in the scene. So maybe the viewer watching, if they watch for a long enough time, will be like, what happened to the other ones who
Right.
off the screen? Um, where did they go? Will they come back again? So all of that was still predetermined. And I think as I was asking these questions, I just wanted to actually make that happen and make it less of a predetermined loop and to allow more randomness to come through. Like maybe this avatar only comes out when it's nighttime or
Mm.
when, if I do create, like a sort of real-time clock sync maybe during the morning time, like these 2 avatars will jog past each other, so I wanted to make that happen, and, I think that's why I, stopped and was just rethinking about my approach to a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it a real-time is it a real-time animation or it's pre-recorded or pre-rendered or, yeah,
There
just in terms of
yeah,
like
there
yeah.
is a, real-time simulation version of it in Unreal, but, I decided to just, like, do, like, baked recordings of it, in the end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that the real-time simulation piece, I think, is just a very interesting expression of use of Unreal,
Yeah.
just, like, having adding that degree of, like, liveness to something digital like that, like you're saying, the element of, like, randomness. So I'll be interested to see if that's something that you, like, work your way into, like, your work, like, going forward. Um, the exhibition text, it mentions that, like, your work, features and we talked about this a little bit, bodies that, have historically haven't been present. We talked about that a little bit with Dad's studio. The way is so it does get represented, but, like, in ways that are not, uh, there's not it's not being represented by you're not seeing representations of, like, the Chinese American, like, female body being developed, or being the person, like, in control of of that image. Um, do you think of this as, like, being a disruption, a reclamation, something else entirely? Like, how do you think about this particular work in terms of, like, your role of, like, putting that body in such scale in these large public spaces?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think that was important to me because, uh, yeah, having done, like, an art history major and, like, working in museums and seeing, let's say, like, daz.com, yeah, I just haven't really seen, like, proper representation of, um, someone like myself on a sort of, uh, monumental not monumental, but, just, like, a proper representation of that in, like, I guess, a sculptural way, even though it's, like, projection, but, um, I do feel like that sense of presence that we were talking about has almost like a sculptural quality when they are depicted at a bigger life-size scale. So yeah, that was important to me, and yeah, I guess it's also just, like, treating these digital characters with, um, care and integrity and some empathy rather than kind of just crushing them or, like, using all the physics systems in, Blender or Unreal to kind of mess them up. Like, I've done that, and then eventually I feel bad for distorting
Right.
avatar form or for, like, just creating, I don't know, like, I do feel a sense of empathy towards these, um, digital creations that I made, whether or not it's, like, my own form or someone else, other avatars, um and I think that is, like, an interesting thing to think about, even with, like, AI and how I interact with AI on a daily basis. I yeah, still think that, empathy matters not only on, like, a individual level, but on a larger scale too. So, yeah, I think some of my next pieces will think a lot more, and explore more on those ideas of like presence and empathy where like the avatars are not just on a loop, but have more autonomy. Um, although it's still partial because I'm still the one programming them. So there's really a lot to
Yeah, yeah.
to go into with that. Yeah.
It's interesting. Um, like with your work, and then like you're starting to have these ongoing conversations with the same characters, and your interest in avatars makes like a ton of sense. I know with like with eye exercise, you started with I guess the youngest character in is that right? It started with one of the youngest
Mhm.
characters in
Yeah.
temporal portrait, and then work with that. We had a conversation with Lawrence Leck, who's kind of building out this whole like Sino-futurist world, and he's been using some of the same characters, identities, like, he has, some of the, the care bot from one of his earlier works makes an appearance. Again, it's interesting to see, like, with the use of particularly, like, game engine technologies does encourage this type of continuity for a digital artist to be able to take things from one place and then present it in different contexts, or return to specific characters. Obviously, many of the artists who are working are still relatively young, all things considered. I think Lawrence he's 40, 41, so he's, like, been working a little bit longer. But it'll be very interesting, I think, like, over the course of your career, if you continue to kind of return to, like, the same characters, these same kind of, like, digital motifs, so to speak, and express them in, like, different ways, particularly as, like, they're sort of bounded by whatever technology is available to you at that time, and then as new technologies come online or new capabilities, it allows you to explore, like, different types of questions. So it's very interesting that for artists who are working specifically with avatar-based, forms of expression, there's a way that you're able to keep coming back to the well, so to speak, like, over and over again. It'll be interesting to see how that develops for you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like characters that love me
Yeah.
make
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Cool. Well, what comes next for you? What's the next thing that you're gonna be working on, like, or questions that you've been, next set of questions that you'll be looking to ask?
Yeah, I think, like, definitely, like, in relation to game engines and simulations, like, that's, something I'm working on right now, just learning more skills and, how to program, how to create these systems, uh, and, yeah, taking my time with just learning that, and then finally just, like, using, the 3D skills I know and the concepts that I've been exploring about time and memory and just combining all that together, I think will be like my next goal. And I think it'll be really exciting too, because I felt kind of, yeah, really pulled in by the idea of simulation and how avatars can exist in that space and what that'll look like. And how also the viewing experience can change. Maybe there's more interactions between like the physical viewer and what's going on digitally in the space. Um, yeah, so I definitely think that'll be like the next phase for me.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time to chat.
Yeah. Well, thanks so
All
much
right.
for the great questions too.